1 in 4 women will experience domestic violence in her lifetime, according to the Domestic Violence Resource Center. With a national average of 28% of women being murdered by their intimate partner, the Texas Department of Public Safety records an average of 35% in Texas. Breaking the numbers down even more, in the WFAA article, Dallas Mayor pledges new focus on domestic violence crimes. It was discovered that murder due to domestic violence had doubled from 10 in 2011 to 26 in 2012. To put it all into perspective, overall, African Americans were victimized by intimate partners at significantly higher rates than any other race, with homicide at the hands of intimate partners being the number one killer of African American women ages 15 to 34. This is a serious problem and is where I will focus my story. From this, the conflict found is the rise in Dallas domestic violence-related murders amongst African Americans, the cause, and the lack of the law enforcement's presence and responsibility. At the beginning of this year, Dallas Mayor Mike Rawlings made a pledge to step up efforts in catching domestic violence abusers after murders connected to domestic violence more than doubled last year. As recently mentioned, from 10 to 26, according to the WFAA article. From this pledge, he led a Men Against Domestic Violence rally and said more warrants and arrests would be issued. However, fast forward into today, in recent stories by WFAA, it has been discovered that the 2 detectives who handled domestic violence cases sat on nearly 700 cases and have now been fired, making this story more than ever newsworthy and timely. While everyone can agree domestic violence is a huge issue in Dallas, deciding on what needs to be done to minimize abuse, maximize abusers' capture rate, and which outlets need the most attention, help, and funding is where the police, medical, physical, psychological experts, shelter homes have been in disagreement. As mentioned in slide 5, after the recent firing of the 2 detectives in charge of investigating domestic violence cases, the police now believe a bigger task force will help greatly. The mayor made a Dallas pledge, but Women Call Moses founder Deborah Bowles is not impressed. In her 2013 interview with WFAA, she poses the question, where are they, the victims and the survivors, going to go? Call the shelter homes and they're at capacity. So to present this story, it is only right and fair that I present it from every angle and view through the eyes, ears, mouth, and hands of those who deal with this topic firsthand, day in and day out. Speaking with and presenting information from domestic violence case psychologists, workers, shelter homes, victims and survivors, lawyers, and police officers will remove and present any bias of sensitivity on my behalf from being formed or detected in this story. The audience will simply see, hear, and feel what the experts and those closest to the topic have expressed to me. Each perspective is of much value to the progression and telling of this story, and therefore will be handled respectively so. The first interviewer will be with Deborah Nixon Bowles, a domestic violence survivor and founder and executive director of Women Call Moses. She can give first-hand experience and a glance at a woman abused, the hardships, the secrecy from minorities, from their family and friends, the troubles and flaws in the reporting abuse and regaining a normal life. She can also talk about the lack of shelter homing and their funds and their support. The second interview will be with Murphy Sears, a volunteer coordinator at Genesis Women's Shelter and Support. She can provide insight into working with domestic abuse cases firsthand, the shelter pros and cons, and Genesis' collaboration with the Dallas Police Department. According to Google Trends search of Dallas domestic violence, after 3 months into the 2013 year, interest in this topic began to decline. In comparison to Dallas rape as another major topic, its figures ranked higher than the latter throughout each year. These findings reveal the lack of media investigation and coverage of domestic violence throughout Dallas. In conjunction with the decline of public interest displayed on this graph, it perfectly connected with the WFAA stories timeline previously mentioned detailing Mayor Rawlings' pledge against domestic violence, his Men Against Domestic Violence rally, and the widely covered domestic violence-related murders of Dallas resident Karen Smith, which all happened between January 13 and March. In the WFAA.com news story titled Dallas Domestic Violence Cases Falling Through the Cracks and Dallas Police Chief Fires 6 Officers, Some Victims Didn't Get Justice, they both cover the large numbers of cases that didn't get looked into by the 2 assigned detectives, which ultimately led to the recent termination. These stories, however, don't give any solutions, nor do they present the cause behind it to useful perspectives from other voices and workers of domestic violence cases, leaving the story unfinished and a potential audience uninterested. According to the FamilyPlace.org website, the Dallas Police Department Family Violence Unit reported 13,733 family violence calls, which results ranged from assault, stalking, kidnapping, and death. These numbers led me to know the target audience isn't only women of African American descent exposed to violence, but wives and or women with children. Over at the Knackle Law Firm website, it reported that 73% of Texans believe that domestic violence is a serious problem in Texas. Another 60% believe that Texas does not do enough to help survivors and their families. This lets me know that even if a person isn't directly affected by domestic violence, they recognize that they can in fact indirectly be affected if a sister, friend, daughter of theirs is in a violent relationship. On a broader scale, doing this story would not only put in people's heart, ears, and on their minds the seriousness of domestic abuse and how imperative it is to be involved with family and friends' dating status, but this also opens the door up to local businesses, charities, and professionals to collaborate with shelters and other domestic abuse-related organizations to help bring awareness while promoting their business. Tootsie's Boutique in Dallas once a month teams up with a cause in which sales proceeds go towards the cause. And just last week, I attended an event at Mockingbird Station in which the nail salon gave manis and petties, and sales and donations earned all went towards Genesis Women's Shelter. Currently, not nearly enough businesses are participating in events like this. But through this story, more people can become enlightened and encouraged to find ways to help. Through awareness comes asking, which brings answers.